Hello everyone, this is Prem Kumar. Welcome to this video on what is pega and what is the scope of pega. If you are entering into the pega world for the very first time, this will be the buzzing question in your mind. What is the scope of pega, or what is pega first? You can search in Google and you will find a lot of interesting definitions for it. I just did search in Google, and whatever you see in the screen, those are all from the Google search results. Many have different definitions of pega. Some say pega is a BPM tool that uses Java concepts. Some say it helps to build the enterprise application. I have my own definition. I would say pega is a software that helps with the business process. There are two terms here. One is a software and the other is a business process. First, let's look into the software terminology. I think you all are aware of what is software is. Let's look into few of these softwares. First, I'm going to talk about the Photoshop. To get a Photoshop software in your machine, you need to get license from Adobe. What Photoshop does is, it helps to beautify the pictures. You can edit, crop, whatever actions you want, you can do using Photoshop software. So that is the main purpose of the software. Let's look into the next software. Next is Postgres. Postgres helps to save the data into the database. It helps to persist the data into the permanent storage. Again, to use an enterprise Postgres, you need to have a right license for it. The third is pega. What pega does is, it helps to design the business process. To acquire pega software, you need to get license from the pega systems. Now we know that pega is a software and it helps with the business process. So what is the term exactly meant business process? You can find business process in almost any organization in the world. Be it a banking organization, insurance organization, or a healthcare organization, every organization, they revolve around a lot of business processes. For simplicity, I will take an example of a banking organization. Whatever you see in the screen, this can be the three main business processes that are involved in a banking organization. First is savings account. The savings account helps to onboard the customer with the bank. They can perform KYC on the customer and then help with onboarding or creating a new account for the customer. Next is loan processing. With loan processing, we can provision loan to the customers. The third is collection process. Let's say if the customer fails to pay the arrear amount for the loan, then they may end up with the customer service department of the banking organization. They will treat the customer, try to find what is the problem with them, and then they can try to find a solution for it to collect the loan amount back. These can be the three main business processes in a banking organization. Now, let's say when a customer enters into a banking organization, how do we store the data? We need to store the customer details, we need to store the loan details, right? We cannot use an Excel to store the data. We need to persist the data into some software. Maybe it can be a Postgres database. To persist the data, you need some entry things, right? So definitely we need some kind of applications that the end users of the bank can use to capture the details and store it into the database. So how do they build the applications? In the current market, there are different technologies and different languages that helps to build with the applications. If you look at this picture, it describes about different languages or different softwares which you can use. You can use Java, you can use JavaScript application, it can be a Python application, and it can also be pega application that helps with onboarding customer, or that can help with the loan processing, and it can also help with the collections process. So how pega helps with these processes is, every business process, you can take a white paper and draw it into a flow diagram, right? Everything will have a case life cycle. If you think about a loan processing, it starts with customer sending a loan request. Then the loan request can be routed to the right department. There they can do all this KYC, onboarding stuff, and do some verification of the documents. Finally, it can go to the approver who can approve the loan or reject the loan. If you see, it starts with the application and finally it ends with approval flow. So all these business processes can be mapped to a case journey. Pega has its case management power to solve all these business processes. So inside a pega application, you can define a case lifecycle for loan processing, and then you can define stages and steps across which the loan processing can go through. And finally, you can also save all those data into the database, and then you can report on the database, and there are a lot more steps which you can do it in pega. So this is what pega is going to offer. Pega can be fit in almost any of the organization that involves business process. It helps with the end users performing certain operation using the application, and then it can also store some data. Okay, now let's look into some brief history about Pega. Pega was founded in 1983 by Alan Trefler. From Alan Trefler's voice, the main motive of Pega software is software for the business people. It means business people can actively involve in the decision making of building an Pega application. You also might have heard about the low-code platform. From Pega Infinity, Pega is focusing more on making the Pega application development as a low-code platform. You might have heard about the App Studio, which helps with the low-code platform, which engages the business people to start their development or to design a case lifecycle inside an App Studio. The next biggest advantage of Pega over any other language is there is no building from scratch. Once you get license from Pega, they provide you with the software that holds a lot of source code already packaged. Once you install Pega software, then you get a lot of features out of the box that comes with the installation. For example, if you want to send out an email, you don't have to start building everything from scratch. All you have to do is configure some email configurations into a Pega rule form that will help with sending out the email. A lot of frameworks are getting built for use. So how does this concept framework comes into the picture? As I told before, Pega is getting used by a lot of organizations. Banking, insurance, healthcare, many more. All these organizations, they have certain standard business processes that they want to include it into the Pega application. Pega started reading what are these common business processes that is applicable throughout the industry. Let's take an example of insurance claim processing. If you look at insurance claim processing, the outer skeleton is going to be same kind of thing. Customer may send out a claim request. The team can process the claim request and it can be sent out for approval. So what Pega did here is they build out a framework, let's call it as claims framework, and then they sell those frameworks as well. So if an organization they want to build a claims application, all they can do is get the framework from Pega and then they can use it as a base layer and build applications over the base layer. And one thing to notice, Pega is not an open source. You have to spend a lot of money to get the software. So what you see here, it is a low-code platform. There is no building from scratch. A lot of frameworks are getting used. Though Pega software is built using the Java engine code, the developers, they don't have to be that proficient in Java. I would say I'm not that very good in Java, but I can do anything in Pega. At the end, it's going to be happy developers because there is nothing you have to build it from the scratch. All you have to do is configure some rule form and Pega's engine code will take care of the rule execution. Okay, now we have seen what is Pega. The next big question is, what is the scope of Pega? If you want to define scope of any software, you have to look into two things. One, how the software is currently performing in the market. Second, to look out for their competitors. Currently, Pega is performing very good in the market because Pega has landed its foot on different swim lanes. If you see here, they have their foot on CRM, that is for customer relationship management, BPM, that we know it's a business process management, and they also have their foot on RPA. RPA stands for robotic process automation. From Google, I just picked a few of the competitors in Pega. This is just my observation. In the CRM side, Salesforce is a tough competitor. In BPM, we have Appian or Camunda, and in RPA, we have UiPath as a tough competitor. Now let's look into the CRM side, Salesforce. So how does Pega and Salesforce compete? I remember one thing, Salesforce, they introduced one framework, they call it as Lightning framework. That is for some advanced UI features. And you know, Pega also introduced one UI framework. We call it as Cosmos UI. So what I meant here is, there will be always competition and both of them are evolving. There is always competition and there is always innovation happening across the competitors. Similarly, if you look into the RPA, Pega also acquired the OpenSpan and they are doing very good in the robotic side as well. So what I'm saying here is, the scope of Pega, it's really good. But we cannot predict what is going to happen in the future. But I can say that in the next 5 years, Pega is going to stay high. If you still think that, what will happen if Pega comes down after 5 years? What I would say is, you will be technically strong enough to learn any other tool or any other software by that time. So do not think much or do not worry much about what is the scope of pega. Currently, it's going to stay good and we hope it will stay that forever. If you have any other questions or some comments about what is pega and what is the scope of pega, you can leave a comment under this video and I'll be there to reply for that. Now that we got some enough introduction about pega, let's start with the tutorial course. See you in the next video.